It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 145, recorded on the 19th of February 2026, and joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack, He Fat Choi Jack. It's Chinese New Year.
And to you too. Yes, it is Chinese New Year. I woke yesterday morning, or Tuesday morning, and the place was silent as the tomb. More or less.
Surely that's lovely news for our listeners too. Don't have any building noise to deal with. So everyone's having a long holiday, Jack. That's fantastic.
Well, a lot of people do leave. That's true. I was talking to a Cantonese neighbour who said, well, we do one family dinner and that's it. Then we had to head to Dubai to get warm and get away from the family. So,
is Dubai more and more a spot, or is this just that particular family?
Oh, it is a bit of a spot, but they would be looking for somewhere where Chinese New Year wasn't celebrated, so that it's less expensive, and that rules out Vietnam and and Malaysia and places like that. So,
There you go. Alrighty.
And Singapore is very popular too, of course, and Japan's really popular too. Because of the yen so low.
Oh well, then, yep, okay. So you'll be enjoying some quiet times, Jack, and a very happy Chinese New Year to all of our listeners. Now we have a new leader of the Liberal Party. Will he be the last? That was the question going around last week. Angus Taylor has beaten Susan Lee in the spill that we talked about last week, Jack, but didn't have the figures. We figured that Angus Taylor was going to win because that was the way it was tipping. He won 34-17 in the end. I think Jane Hume was elected deputy against Ted O'Brien. He lost his deputyship. Jane Hume's taken that job. I think that was 30-20, the numbers there from memory. I honestly don't think he'll be the last leader of the Liberal Party, Jack, but he has got a Himalayan task ahead of him.
He does. It's always useful to remember that it's very rare for an opposition to win government because of their own abilities. Generally, governments lose. Mainly, they leave government because they've lost their way. And his only real prospect is that the government does lose its way, or the economy goes bad, and that gives him a chance.
A bit of a leak really occurred not long after the spill, Jack. Within a day, there was an immigration, what we call it, a policy blueprint that was supposed to be one of the future announcements of Susan Lee's when she was leader of the opposition. I did see Angus Taylor. He said he claimed he hadn't seen it. Certainly, he said it had never been introduced to Parliament. But how does the Liberal Party approach the issue of immigration, Jack? Because that's where they're bleeding to fond, but if they, or not fond, on these days, One Nation, they're bleeding to One Nation, and do they get in the wagon with them, or do they mark their own territory, Jack?
No, just play quietly, I would.
No immigration announcements?
No, not much. As of this morning, the Prime Minister was sort of going to war with One Nation on immigration. The smart play, I would have thought, would be to sit back and let them fight it out.
Yeah, I think that makes a fair bit of sense. Certainly the Albanese government's weakness is financial, related to government spending, related to interest rates, stubborn inflation, cost of living, all those sorts of things. That's where you would be running the attack lines. Now, Angus Taylor, is he going to be the right man to do that, Jack? He had a pretty ordinary time as a shadow treasurer. He's a former minister of the Crown, of course, but he had a pretty ordinary time as a shadow treasurer.
Well, firstly, governments usually get into trouble because the economy is not going well. This is the most common way you lose government, no? Not just in Australia, but in other places as well. I think he came out and apologised for getting something wrong in his past as a shadow treasurer the other day.
Fair bit of that.
Yeah, and he did. Ways to that,
those things. Yeah,
and he did, but he's not Robinson Crusoe amongst politicians for having made mistakes. It just depends what he does next. Really, does he play a nice, steady game? That's what it's all about. I mean, he's not going to push them out of the Treasury benches. They're going to get pushed out because the economy goes bad or they go bad. So his job is not to push them out, just to be steady and give some kind of alternative. So if that Labor gets on the nose, they'll vote another way.
Well, I suggested on Friday, obviously having known the results of the spill, that it was time for the Liberal Party to shut up and stop talking about itself, Jack, because I think that's probably irritating voters more than anything else. And I suggested Angus Taylor use the parliamentary recession period of just over 2 weeks to sit down, have a bit of a think about things, announce his shadow cabinet in quick, reasonably quick order, and then make perhaps a policy announcement after that sort of 2 week period. But he's just jumped straight into it. And I just think at this end of this particular part of the electoral cycle, a bit of silence might be pretty good for the Liberal Party right now.
I generally think these days politicians chase the media cycle too much,
too hard. Yeah.
Sometimes just saying bugger all is a better play. Yeah.
Well, if I was spinning for him, mate, and I'm definitely not putting the shingle out either, but I'd be saying, listen, you make the statements up front on the day you became leader, and that you're going to go away, you're going to call on your colleagues, you're going to have conversations, you're going to have discussions about the direction of the party, and this is going to take a couple of weeks, and then they'll be ready and firing to go in the Parliament, and a few announcements along the way. That's really the way it should have been.
Yeah, take up a hobby, so you're not chasing the media cycle. Take up golf or something.
I tell you what, if his media people are chasing up a Women's Weekly type spread, they would all need their asses kicked, because they really need to appeal to a completely different demographic. And I don't know that Angus is that guy, but we'll find out, Jack.
Has a Women's Weekly type spread ever been a success?
Well, it was. It definitely was back in the day, Jack. Back in the 80s and 90s. It's not relevant now.
Yeah.
In fact, it would probably be a bit of a negative. I mean, it would only be those people so-called inside the Beltway or in the Canberra bubble who'd read it, and the rest of us would be pretty perplexed. But anyway,
Julia Gillard,
she did one. Let's soften her up. Let's soften that image up.
And got slaughtered because there was no fruit in the fruit bowl, right? I mean,
yeah. These things can go wrong as well. Jane Hume is the deputy, Jack. It has been said of both Angus and Jane that they were sort of senior culprits in last year's election drubbing. I just wonder if they're both open to fairly significant attacks. Jane Hume's in the Senate, of course, where numbers are a bit different. What do you? Yeah. I mean, we've got. The point I wanted to make was that there is a Liberal Party review conducted by their grandees, Prue Goward and Nick Minchin. It's never seen light of day, Jack. It's been shown to Peter Dutton, and from reading between the lines, it appears that he's not happy with it to the point of calling the lawyers in.
I can see why, as an internal matter for political parties, they want to do that, to see whether, what could we have done better, right? When you have a bad loss. I don't see any point whatsoever in putting them out in the public. And Labor's done this too, right? Was always Barry Jones and someone who went and did a review after a bad loss, and you think, you got to bury this.
You never publish this.
Yeah, you got to bury this in the bottom drawer.
But if you're a member of the Liberal Party or a financial member of the Liberal Party, wouldn't you expect to receive something like that, some sort of? I think if you're going to appeal to the rank and file, you've got to at least be honest with them and say, look, this is where we made mistakes. But if you've got a document that cannot be released basically to anyone because it might lead to legal action, testing our defamation laws, I just think you're really just not going to learn from any of this. And they haven't learned. They really haven't learned since Albo beat Morrison. I think they decided that was all down to Scott Morrison and, we'll be able to pick ourselves up. And then they get walloped last year and I just still don't seem to understand it. The biggest problem they've got is a big W. That doesn't stand for a win. That stands for women.
I just don't see any upside in putting that out in public because that will be the next media cycle will be what's wrong with the Liberal Party. That doesn't help them at all.
Malcolm Turnbull might have dropped a particular, might have been a little bit of a Freudian slip there, Jack, when he described Angus Taylor as the best qualified idiot that they've ever met. I wouldn't describe Malcolm as an idiot, by the way, but it was a bit of a stinger. And some of the people that I know who live in our mate's electorate, in the electorate of Hume, Angus Taylor's electorate there, a lot of them conservatives, Jack, not terribly pleased with Angus either. There was actually, they ran a Conservative independent against him a couple of elections ago.
Yeah. Is there a more bitter man in Australian politics than Malcolm Turnbull?
Well, he turned up in Canberra. He had those sunglasses. They had to be worth probably $2,000, I reckon. They're the best sunglasses I've seen. And he just went down. I suppose he would. He did have. According to Malcolm, he quoted a minister without naming that minister. And I actually strongly suspect that he had no meetings with any member of the government, Jack. Certainly not in the cabinet. But he's turned up there to just basically sink the slipper a little bit. It looked to me.
Well, the sane approach to losing your role and ending in politics is to go away and do something else. It is not to hang around and refight old battles. You look at the people who've made a success.
He's a man at his leisure, Jack. He's entitled to have a bit of a hobby, isn't he?
I'm not saying he's not entitled to. I'm not saying he's not entitled to do it. I'm just saying you look at the people who've made a success of post-political life, the ex-prime ministers particularly, and the model is, Julia Gillard, John Howard, Paul Keating. Go away and do something else and make a success of it, right?
Look, I think people genuinely dislike the rise of politicians, but gee, the last few, they seem to be perhaps, Malcolm would certainly suffer from this because their careers ended prematurely.
Yeah.
Maybe they still think they've got a couple of years left in the legs.
Yeah.
And you could say that of a number of them, Jack.
Yeah. I mean, and Tony Abbott's another one who does that. Yes. I think that's right, but I just think it's bad for them personally, and it doesn't carry much weight. They just look like a bitter old man. As to how Taylor goes with your conservative friends in Hume, I mean, if you look at his background, he most closely lines up with Malcolm Fraser or John Gorton in terms of his schooling and his employment, etc., etc. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, that was a really good background to have in the 1950s and 1960s.
It's probably not so much now.
Yeah, but I'm not so sure it carries any weight in 2026.
The local view, by the way, Jack, no names, no petrol, but the local view is his brother's a terrific bloke, one of the best blokes in the district, but the same cannot be said of Angus. That's from the local knowledge I get.
Is this the Miliband theory that they made the wrong bloke the leader, the wrong brother the leader? And,
maybe it is. Look, Victoria, the Victorian Labor government is seemingly constantly under siege. Now, the allegations of CFMEU and bikie gang rorting, do we have to keep calling them allegations, Jack? I'm not quite sure about that.
No.
You could actually prove that to a certain evidentiary standard without having too many problems.
Well, given the depth and the breadth of the allegations, I think we should call them allegations. That there was some rorting, I think, can be said without putting allegations in front of it. Jacinda Allen faces a particular problem because this largely happened on what they call in Victoria the big build, and she was the minister charged with putting the big build happen, making the big build happen. And her husband is a former CFMEU official, so this puts her in a really, really difficult position. And at the moment, she's not handling it at all well. I've got to say, I've seen quite a few.
I saw a couple last week that weren't flash.
And on the contrast, I saw an interview. What's her name? Pat Scavalis did with Jess Wilson, the Liberal leader.
Oh yeah,
and
see that.
And for the first time in about 20 years, I saw a Victorian Liberal leader that I thought, hey, she actually goes okay,
Well, yeah. Look, that certainly seems, it's sort of any port in a storm in her case, but look, she seems to be reasonable. Look, if you can't be making points against this, scoring points against this government at the moment, really, you should be packing up your bags and leaving. There is some polling, Jack. This is from Demos, I believe.
Yes, it is.
We've got the LNP in the stratospheric heights of 29%. Gee, they'd love that federally. This is obviously listeners for the state of Victoria. Labor at 23. One Nation at 21. The Greens at 15 was high for them, but that probably says more about Victoria than anything else. And the others are 12, two-party preferred. And I really don't know how they sort the preferences out in this, Jack, but I'd be going a bit higher than 53-47.
It is. The polling that really stuck out for me, this is kind of personal, I suppose, is in the inner metro of Melbourne. Liberal Party 28, Greens 23, Labor 23. That's kind of all standard. The One Nation Party, 15%.
There are cookers everywhere. There are cookers everywhere, Jack.
Oh, this is my territory. I just couldn't believe it when I read that.
Well, you were living in Carlton. Let's say you'd see some bloke shuffling up the street, muttering to himself. There's your One Nation constituency.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. Maybe a few more than perhaps when you were living in Carlton, Jack, which quite a few years ago now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an astonishing thing. Are people going One Nation? That's whenever they get the pollster on the phone. And, of course, all these polls aren't done by phone. Some of them are done internet-based. I'm not sure what Demos uses. I haven't looked at their
methodology,
their statements. But are people just yelling out One Nation as a form of, we really don't like what's going on at the moment?
Well, that's what, when I saw 15% in inner Melbourne, I thought, how much of this is just a protest vote and what will happen to that protest vote come election day? One thing I'd say about Jess Wilson is she is pretty good, but I don't know that she's got much behind her, but and that kind of worried me. And then I was remembering a good friend of ours who was a state government advisor who said you only need one or two decent people in a state government to be a success. And I remember
That's
asking
probably
him,
right. Probably three, I would think.
I remember asking him, he says, "What if you have three?" And he says, "Don't know. No one's ever tried it."
Well, it's never actually happened where you've had three talented people in the state government. But I know where that joke comes from. But yeah, so the AFR is reporting, Jack, the Victorian Government's infrastructure boom became the site of drug deals, strippers, bribes, jobs for mates and ghost ships. Sounds like a Friday night for you about 25 years ago, Jack.
Oh, yeah, no,
CFMEU
never my thing.
corruption led to a massive blowout in costs for federal and state taxpayers. A damning investigation has found. It's probably at that point, it was always figured Newark, when the mob were all over the redevelopment of Newark, New Jersey, that there was probably a tap of around 16% that just basically flowed straight to organised criminal syndicates. And it seems to be the same sort of way it is here. I would say for Jacinda Allen, any week where Mick Gatto is turning up saying, "I don't know anything about this, I had nothing to do with the big build," is a pretty bad week for you. So,
you know where a lot of this comes from? The last time we did the equivalent of a big build in Victoria, the Australian Workers' Union did most of the work, all the below ground work, right?
this is a bigger build, by the way.
And all of the civil construction work, if you like, what we would call civil construction work rather than commercial construction work. And that made a difference because they weren't the CFMEU to put
Well, yeah, the BLs, etc. If we want to go back
to those days,
far, yes. Jack, yeah.
And that made a big difference, and that's kind of what's gone wrong.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a lot of things that could be avoided here, because the CFMEU really should be all powerful in the construction industry, and really we do have these things, massive projects, particularly when governments look the other way. At very best, your cost of construction to taxpayers is plus 15 to 20% just on the raw, on the raw.
Yes.
So if a building's built with $10 billion, you know how much money is or not a building, but a major piece of infrastructure is so many $1 billion. You can just imagine the money that's dripping off them.
Some of the stories are terrific, I've got to say. Blokes paying $500 to $1,000 to get a job because their job paid $5,000 to $10,000 for a weekend of work. The guys, how they have those well-paid traffic control people. They would go down to the strip club and recruit their friends from there, and then the girls would put on a show in the site shed. This is just, can you believe it's happening stuff?
Wow. That is extraordinary stuff.
I can remember there being problems with back in the I think the Grollos got into trouble.
Yeah, I remember this.
For having putting on a bit of a barbecue and a few beers and a
bit of backsheesh,
and a strip show on a Friday afternoon on some of the building sites. So this is not really new. It's just something that happens in cycles.
Look, we can honestly just wrap this up by saying the Labor government in Victoria is limping to re-election in November, and it doesn't look good for them.
28th of November.
Yes, last Saturday in November. So that's when probably the hammer will fall for Labor after, God, what am I going to say, Jack? I think it will have been 16 years by then, mate.
Something like that, and it's looking for all the world. We've seen, you and I have seen this before, like a Labor government that needs to go. right?
Yeah, I know. It's very, very difficult to disagree with that. The other thing I would also say is it's not a good time to be in government. So when you get in there's massive debts, and you open up that cupboard, and oh my God, So it could be pretty grim times for Victorians in terms of some austerity coming its way.
Jacinda Allen can confidently book something, book a holiday for Christmas. I think she could go travelling.
So, yes, I think that's pretty right. Prayer protests, Jack. Follow this story all that closely. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, this is according to SBS, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says New South Wales Police should provide a full explanation after officers dragged away Muslim worshippers praying at a Sydney protest opposing the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. I'm sure our listeners have all seen the footage. There was a gathering of protesters, and they took to their knees and began praying. I was talking to some colleagues about this, but the point I made was that regardless of how that situation occurred, it was the sort of footage that would lead around the world, and certainly it's turned out that way, Jack.
Yeah. It's a tricky one. It
just looks terrible. It just looks terrible.
It's a tricky one. Everyone's got a right to religious freedom. That's sort of sacrosanct in Australia. But we don't normally tolerate it being used as a sort of a tool of protest. So it is tricky.
Oh, it's extremely tricky. And as I say, when police do intervene in a situation like this, there's 100 people around with phones who pick this stuff up, and it looks terrible. It runs in news services around the world. So, I think that's one where I would certainly request police sort of. I'm not sure of the context of it. Did they regard? Obviously, police regard as this prayer group as blocking traffic or blocking thoroughfare. And I think that's why they moved when they did. They obviously had move-along orders, but looks terrible. Robert Duvall, perhaps one of the great actors of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, dead at 95. Hadn't been acting for some time. I do love that you've put in the on not doing Godfather III. He said it boiled down to money. If you're going to pay Pacino twice what you pay me, fine. But 5 times, come on, guys. But there's a little bit of a prelude to that where he's saying, look, it was all about money. Godfather III, I mean, it's 20-odd years after Godfather II. It was the only reason it was being done was for money. And he couldn't figure out why he should be on 1/5 of Al Pacino's wages. So he opted, perhaps very sensibly, Jack, to sit that one out.
And to be fair, in my view, it looked like it was only being done for money. The finished product.
Oh, it's a terrible thing. You know the background too. Winona Ryder was cast as Michael Corleone's daughter, but she, I think, had some personal issues and couldn't make the set. So Coppola cast his daughter in the role, who obviously went on to become an outstanding director, but it just cannot act at all.
This is Sophia, is that right?
Sophia Coppola, yes. And that really was telling in that show. Everyone was sort of going through the motions, but it didn't make any sense. And the story was bizarre, Jack. It was, you would have been outraged. It was apparently all related to the Banco Ambrosiano scams in the Vatican, Jack, through the Vatican. Anyway, look, Robert Duvall, what's your favourite film, Jack, that you've seen him in? And we've got some rippers, of course. Colonel Kilgore in Apocalypse Now. He made up 11 minutes of that film, and that is the most memorable stuff. Some of the most memorable stuff in that film.
If you just say the words Apocalypse Now, you will get a Robert Duvall.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. He started with To Kill a Mockingbird. His first film role, he's playing Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it's I think The Godfathers 1 and 2, he was just sensational in those. Right.
Yeah, so very understated, wasn't he? But still made you feel that he was the awkward Irish adoptee in the family that didn't quite have the same cachet with the old man as did his biological children. So
the scene where he gets told that you're not a wartime consigliere, Tom, and we're moving on. That's just terrific acting.
Yeah,
you know?
He really,
terrific acting all around, not just him.
He and Pacino, yes,
and I think the old man, Marlon Brando, was in that scene as well. You know, and so. Just tremendous stuff, you know. I mean, he was a very talented
too, where Michael sort of humiliates him, and he really bounces back hard at him, you know. And look, wonderful actor, and we're looking.
He was great in MASH as well.
Oh, he was wonderful in MASH. He was absolutely wonderful in MASH, and so he had this great. Grasp.
Very unlikable, but wonderful.
True Grit, another Academy Award, and perhaps not film the first time around. The Conversation, which is an absolute classic, Godfathers 1 and 2, To Kill a Mockingbird and MASH. There are just so many things there. Tender Mercies he also did, which sort of reignited his career, and he sort of retired, stopped filming by the time he was 85.
Just while we're doing deaths, Reverend Jesse Jackson died yesterday.
Yes, Reverend Jesse Jackson did pass away, I think, on Monday as we record this, Jack. And what do you make of his career? He's most famously in the photo of black activists pointing at the assassin's position, the assassin being James Roy, I believe, from memory, who had just fired a rifle and killed Martin Luther King. There was Jesse there.
A big public life, Jesse Jackson, and I've been reading some of the comments on him, and there are a lot of people who loved him and a lot of people who didn't like him, and that's not one side or the other. That's across the board. But he's like most of us, he was flawed. But if you live a life so publicly as he did, your flaws and your good things all become very public. So that's what you end up with. I'll tell you what he could do. He could deliver a speech and deliver a sermon.
He was a very powerful orator. He had the absolute master when he was a student, Martin Luther King. So, yes, an extraordinary life. And his anointment back in the day, I think we go back to certainly Clinton's period. His support of the Clintons really got them over the line with the black vote going back many, many years.
But he also had falling outs with everybody. Right?
Yeah.
You know,
as a cantankerous fellow.
Yeah, as I say, the Obamas were pretty slow to get out there and say something post his death because he had a huge falling out with them, and
All right. Speaking of guys with the wobbles, Sir Keir Starmer, Jack, faced fresh humiliation on Monday after he's forced by Nigel Farage into abandoning his controversial plan to cancel elections for millions of people. Can you tell me first, before we get into the fresh humiliation, why he was seeking to cancel what are local government elections for millions of people in the UK, Jack?
Well, they are planning a reconstruction of local government in the UK, in England particularly. And they use that as an excuse, if you like, to say that, well, because that's coming up, we're going to cancel or postpone this year's elections. And no one's going to say this, but I suspect that the reason why they wanted to postpone them was that they were going to get a shellacking.
Get belted. But But I've got to talk about the political instincts. Now, there is a sort of rationale here that they would be essentially electing people in their old boroughs to council positions. And why wouldn't you just let the clock run on that? Was that going to be a burden to the taxpayer in any single way? Where people were going to start knocking off office furniture? What was going to happen?
Yeah, you would think that postponing the elections would be fine, right? Except that they are so on the nose, they can't. They haven't got.
Looks sneaky, yeah.
They haven't got the political capital to be able to do that anymore. We're at the stage now where you. I click on the Guardian or whatever the UK websites to have a look at what's happening over there, and you think, well, what else could possibly go wrong?
Well, I'll give you a bit of a list, Jack. I'll give you a bit of a list. Certainly, his appointee to, and we've covered this in previous shows, but Mandelson is under active criminal investigation. It seems that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is under some form of police investigation at the moment. Those things, I get back. I mean, and this is not Starmer's particular concern, but we're starting to get into sort of existential territory around the monarchy here, and it's like they can't bury this, but it won't go away. And you and I have probably heard about this well before the release of the Epstein files. The conduct of Andrew as the UK's trade envoy was outrageous. So there's stuff that's and that was probably what we heard on the grapevine, and so there's going to be a lot worse rather than better.
Yeah, it's been sort of common enough knowledge that he was seeking to use his position to put himself in a better financial place, and also just his general behaviour. I think there's a wonderful story about Bangkok where I think he tried to set a record for the number of bar girls who could be ordered to a hotel room in one day.
And we were talking 30 or 40 from memory.
Something like
70,
that.
Something like that.
Something like that, yes.
And yes, I certainly that is well known. But the feathering of his own nest, Jack, or allegedly, is a big part of the problem, because you've got misconduct in public office charges potentially there. And that's not including some of the more sordid stuff that may come his way, Jack.
Yeah, I don't really think that will go anywhere, and there's a reason why.
But how do they do that? How are they going to do that? They can't He is one of them. He is probably the most despised person in the UK after Sir Keir Starmer. I just get a feeling that within the British public that they really want to see. They really want to see some punishment handed out here.
Yeah, he was known. I'm told in the Foreign Office as his royal buffoon, and I don't think that they would have. I'm presuming that the Foreign Office people, who are generally very smart, wouldn't have given him anything valuable enough that he could really rise to misconduct in public office. It would just be him as a person being a grubby individual, which we know he was. So I actually don't think it will go anywhere, really. I think it's...
Yeah, I know that they won't want it to go anywhere, Jack, but I just have a feeling that this sort of thing is now sort of officially out of control.
Yeah, well, I think the same thing of the Mandelson thing.
Well, there you've got potentially Official Secrets Act breaches.
Yeah, the official
that's sketchy, but you've also got misconduct in public office.
Well, the Official Secrets Act is the thing that you charge junior people with. You don't charge cabinet ministers with, because they all leak. Right? So once that's a can of worms no one wants to open, right? Is leaking cabinet documents, because then everybody will be in the can.
But if there's, and there is clear evidence of him moving what was confidential financial information across to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that's the problem he's got, not the official secrets.
With the promise of 10,000. Thanks very much for dropping that money my way.
Yes. Yeah. So
he's got a real problem.
That's where it gets murky. I understand that. Just my instincts are that I don't think that that Andrew's going to be charged with anything. I think he's. Someone described him the other day as living in an open prison on the Sandringham estate, and I think that's going to be his fate.
Oh, I think that'll be his fate, the majority of his fate. But he might find himself standing tall before a beak at some point, Jack. We shall see. The Epstein files is the anger around it. I just don't think it's something that can be easily suppressed. But
one of the ones that fascinated me this week is, what's her name? Kathy Rumer. She was deputy.
What's going on there?
Deputy legal counsel to the Obama White House, and then legal counsel to the Obama White House.
General counsel to
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs.
Now, mate, I've got to tell you, that's a job, right? You know, you're going to be able to hardly walk with the weight of money in your pocket doing a job like that.
I understand, Jack. Yeah, I understand all of that. So why does a woman with particularly those legal credentials and resume, continue to have conversations with
10,000 mentions
to Epstein as her uncle on occasions? This is kind of there's a number of sort of spooky references to that. Fergie said he was the brother she never had, and all this sort of nonsense. Why? How can you sort of say, oh, well, I'm just going to ignore the fact that this man is a convicted child sex offender? I'm just going to ignore all of that, and I'm going to have all of these conversations with and there are so many of these people, Jack, who have just said, the hell with it. I don't care. I don't care about the victims he's left behind. I don't care about the women he's oppressed and tormented. I don't care about any of that shit. I think he's a lovely guy to have an email chat with. Yeah. And I need 10 grand pretty quickly.
Or I'd like some in Kathy Rumer's case, I'd like some first class fares to Paris and a 10,000 US handbag.
These guys that just walk up starts for compromise. You know what I mean? There's no sense that that maybe this could come out and cause you a problem.
Sad. Anyway,
well, it's for me. I wrote about this today. I mean, who goes to the party of a convicted pedophile who gets out of jail? You ever been to one of those, Jack?
No, not my normal kind of party. No.
Martinis, champers, all that sort of stuff. That no one does that except for the elites, where it seems to be acceptable. Oh, it doesn't matter. He's a libertine. He's very smart. He's got money. He has Woody Allen sitting in the corner. I mean, the lack of judgment is just appalling.
I would say this: don't underestimate the desire of people to hang around with famous people, even people who are already famous themselves.
Yeah.
I wrote about this on Substack a little while ago. One of my favourite stories about this. I met a bloke who was remember that little awful cricket show they used to play in the lunch thing, beach cricket, right?
Oh, yeah.
This bloke produced that. And he became good mates with Alan Border, who was the star of the show. And a few years later, they fetch up, and he's confessed to Alan Border that the three great loves of his life were his family, cricket, and his Rolling Stones collection, record collection. A few years later, they turn up in London, they're having a drink, and Border says to him, "Listen, mate, the Stones are playing tomorrow. I can get us tickets, but I've got to pick you up early, right? I'll pick you up in the car." So he picks him up in the hotel, takes him out to the venue. I think it was the O2 or whatever it's called. They go in the back gate, jump out, lanyard straight on the neck, through all the labyrinth of corridors, and they're in the Stones green room. And he gets to spend an hour with Mick and Keith, who are huge cricket fans, of course.
Yeah, they were, both of them. But Mick especially.
But they've been famous for 40 years, and his comment was they were as much fanboys about being there with Alan Border as I was the fanboy being there with them. So
I know that. I know that works, and look, I certainly understand how that people will have a certain allure. But if you're invited to, and this actually happened to Kevin Rudd. Now, Kevin Rudd was not ambassador at the time to the US. He was working for a think tank in New York.
Yeah.
And he was invited to attend an Epstein thing. And his offers, I mean, look, Kevin's probably one of those guys who I don't want to feel awkward. No, he's actually sort of said, "Who the hell's this?" And I think they put out a cursory sort of inquiry and then had no further contact. And meanwhile, Epstein's saying, "Oh, Kevin Rudd's going to be at my place tonight."
He was an excellent
former president of Australia.
He was an excellent networker.
So this is how he kind of worked. But my point is that when you were invited to something like this, and Kevin Rudd didn't even get past the stage of who is this guy, these people, all they had to do, if they didn't know his background, and many of them, of course, knew him prior to 2008 when he was charged when it was the first time and convicted and sentenced to a year in jail, which he was released in February 2009. The people either knew him beforehand or knew him afterwards. And if they knew him afterwards, all they do is Google, and there it would be is one count he pleaded guilty to two single counts. One was prostitution. One was prostitution with a minor, and that would be enough for most people to say, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with this guy." So what was it? It's got to be more than money and allure, because these are spectacular misjudgments.
Yeah, no, seriously, I think it's fine.
I think there's a little bit more. Well, there's a lot more to this. My money's on him being a Russian spy. The polls certainly think so. Donald Tusk certainly thinks so, Jack, that he was an FSB or KGB agent. Moving on, Munich Conference. Al Jazeera reports that during his address at the conference on Friday, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz called on the US and Europe to repair and receive transatlantic trust together. Let me begin with the uncomfortable truth. A rift, a deep divide has opened between Europe and the United States. Vice President J.D. Vance said this a year ago here in Munich. He was right in his description. So a little bit of kissing up there. Then we get to Marco Rubio, Jack, the US Secretary of State, who says, "We care deeply about your future and ours." And then it comes, however, the big however. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from a profound sense of concern for Europe, to which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive because the two great wars of the last century serve as history's constant reminder. I'm here today to make it clear that America is charting the path towards a new century of prosperity, and that once again we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies. I just want to go on, Jack. He just finishes. We do not want. He gives them a bit of grief. He said, above all, an alliance based on the recognition that what we, the West, have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable. Because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. We do not want allies shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and heritage and are willing to help us to defend it. I mean, if that's not some sort of cultural imposition, I don't know what is, Jake.
And something I didn't have on my bingo card, he got a standing ovation for it. From the Europeans. And I think the reason he did, and he's having a terrifically good few months at the moment, Marco Rubio. He'd be a hot favourite for 2028 at the moment over J.D. Vance. Is that he
ahead of J.D. Vance.
Is that he framed the problem as one around Western civilization. And I watched the speech. And as I say, I was astounded that all of these European heavyweights were on their feet clapping like seals.
I could give you an explanation as to why they were doing that, Jack. I mean, it's just sycophancy, basically. But what they're being told is that, unlike the United States, and I'll quote Rubio again, the only fear we have is the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny, not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. Colonialism doesn't matter, even though you rip the joints off blind, and that's kind of why you've got all those big buildings around your cities.
Yeah. Anyway, he got a fabulous reception from the European foreign ministers, etc. They're all running up and down to get on the record saying, we agree with him. So interesting to see, and he is having a terrific run into the next presidential election if he wants to, Marco Rubio.
Yeah. Look,
having a lot more luck than
Zelensky also
Vance.
spoke, Jack.
Yes, he did.
And he said Putin doesn't live like ordinary people. He can't imagine life without power or after it. The everyday concerns of real societies don't interest him. His reference points aren't living advisors or the world as it is today, but dead emperors and faded maps. He consults Tsar Peter and Empress Catherine more than he consults anyone who understands modern life. Whew, that's a good slapping, and I think that's about right on the money, isn't it? That was President Vladimir Zelensky of Putin, Jack.
Yeah, and it's. I think they're doing peace talks yet again, somewhere in Europe. It's at an interesting stage, isn't it? I mean, we're still stuck in that position where the Russians don't seem to have the capacity to win, but nor do the Ukrainians have the technology available to them to enable them to push the Russians out. So it's tricky.
We'll go on. I mean, basically the Munich conference wrapped up. Also present there, Gavin Newsom, Jack, California governor, AOC, Congresswoman, US member of the House of Representatives, Whitmer, Hillary Clinton, Jack, also there at a bit of a primary almost for the 2028 presidential candidates. I don't know about AOC.
I'm not sure about Hillary. That might be
either. That's your long shot. That's your $100
certainly Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom will be candidates, I think, and I think at this stage. Congresswoman Cortez fancies her chances. So, yes, I think it was like a little bit of a primary.
Oh, well, I think she could sort of easily elbow her way into a vice presidential ticket, Jack.
Yes, she could.
Anyway, so there was a bit of a sign here. We're talking about Zelensky's speech at Munich, and it appears that people politely listen to him and don't do very much thereafter. But this story came to me just today, Jack. This comes from the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, which is a multi-platform journalism exercise known as OCCRP.org. I'll give that to you again because it's well worth subscribing to their stuff. Won't cost you a dime, although they would like some donations. OCCRP.org. And you'll sort of feast on sort of global corruption stories. They ran a story today that's saying that Russian drones, a very commonly used drone, previously manufactured or often manufactured to a point in Iran, also contained European manufactured components. And Ukraine soldiers have discovered this themselves, and I'll just quote from the article. By dissecting the charred remains of downed Geran 2 drones, which is the Iranian drone I was talking about, Ukraine's military intelligence agency has been able to map out the anatomy of this model and the components that go into it. The The total number of components is in the hundreds, of which only a few dozen are of Russian origin. Many are produced by companies from the United States and China, but over 100 are produced by about 20 European firms. Now, the items include microchips, receivers, transistors, diodes, antennas, and a fuel pump. In a statement to reporters, David O'Sullivan, the EU's chief sanctions envoy, wrote that tackling sanctions circumvention is a key priority. I should explain, of course, that any trade of military equipment between members of EU states and Russia is banned, is sanctioned, but it's allowing to get through. He said, David O'Sullivan said, we will not ignore cases, blah, 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 but it's happening under their own nose, Jack. And largely, without the contribution of these European manufacturers, 2 Russian drones that are bombing civilian centres, Jack, including Kyiv, constant drone attacks on the electricity infrastructure there, pretty much every night from drone attacks. And it's all, a good portion of this equipment is coming from Europe, Jack. In fact, probably the stuff that makes it work without the contribution of these European firms.
Yeah, they could probably swap out other stuff, but this is the stuff that they can't swap out. This history is full of this, of course, of people in business who are prepared to prepared to supply the other side for a sufficiently large sweetener.
Your neck of the woods said to be involved, Jack. Trade coming through Hong Kong.
Well, our friends in Macau during World War II were supplying the Chinese, and during the Korean War was supplying the Chinese through Macau with Western equipment. So I'm told.
All right. We'll get back to our next story, but we want to just concentrate on some hard news first. In Iran, there was an interview with where Reza Pahlavi defended the historic and strategic relationship between the Iranian people and Israel. He pointed to the legacy of Cyrus the Great, cooperation in the region, and the potential for future partnership between a free Iran and Israel. Pahlavi drew a clear distinction between the Iranian people and the current regime in Tehran, emphasising that Iranians seek peaceful relations. There's an thing that you've included there saying Islam has collapsed in Iran. 70% of Iranians, about 65 million people, have left Islam. 2/3 of the mosques nationwide have closed due to low attendance. I guess we could say of this is that X bit there, Jack, that at least it's not confirmed. It's someone's throwing some figures out there that may or may not be true. So we'll just make that clear. There are
3 or 4 different reasonably reputable reports to that effect. So that's why
I'm not surprised by it, but you want some sort of confirmation.
Yeah, obviously, and that's almost impossible to get given the way the regime is policing itself at the moment. But yeah, no, I wouldn't stake my life on it, but I'd say that there's enough. There's enough there to say that there has been a reduction in adherence to Islam in Iran.
Well, it's
on a reasonably wide scale.
In terms of human behaviour, it's unsurprising, isn't it? If you've got a religion that is really not attached to. I mean,
it's a state religion. Yes.
Well, exactly right. The belief of the mullahs is that they've been established by God to run Iran. It's almost it's like Immaculate Conception, Jack. So, that sort of adherence is going to drive a lot of people away.
When you have a state religion and the state becomes unpopular, the religion becomes unpopular.
Yeah, exactly right. It's unsurprising. Meanwhile, Jack, there are some fairly serious bits of kit being dragged across from the Pacific and the Indian Oceans, circling around Iran, Jack, from the United States.
one of the
including
comments
their
I read,
monster, the big monster,
the big bomb.
the big aircraft carrier. I can't. It's not the Lincoln, but I just can't remember which name it is. A monstrous thing. It's a city on the sea. So what's happening there? Just a bit of a saber rattling, Jack, because the Iranians have got those sort of crazy guys in their little, inflatable boats running around causing mayhem, Jack, and sometimes sort of PT type boats. But there's some serious American kit there at the moment that could easily lead to an explosive sort of situation.
They're not quite McHale's Navy, are they? It seems that we're stuck in this pattern where the Iranians and the other Gulf states don't want America to attack Iran and the Israelis because they're not quite sure whether they're ready to defend, because the Iranians the Iranians have some capacity to inflict damage. How much? No one really quite knows, I suspect. But on the other hand, they'd quite like to see the end of the Iranian regime. So it is a tricky situation.
It's very difficult to explain in a very short period of time that we have just how entrenched that regime is. And we're not just talking about the mullahs, but we're talking about the layers of sort of personnel around the regime who are essentially invested in its continued state. So regime change will not come quickly. You've essentially got the wealthiest people in Iran who are invested in the continuance of the Islamic Federation.
There are some reasonably credible reports that attempts are being made to find the people in the regime who would accept change, provided they get to keep a fair bit of what they've got and keep their jobs, etc., etc. So,
all right, Cuba, Jack, really is on the brink there. Been reliant on foreign aid, got some massive structural economic problems. They've got oil not coming into the country, so there are very, very harsh restrictions on limitations of petrol. Basically, the biggest employer in Cuba is the military, and it is looking like it is wavering, Jack. And I don't know that anyone's really prepared for what might happen if there is either regime change or at least some response to the current regime in Cuba. There's a very strong likelihood of mass arrivals in Florida, mass arrivals of Cubans. Should that be the case, Jack? Is the world ready for this?
I think the same thing's going on in Cuba. That is, that they're looking for.
I think there are bigger problems in Cuba in terms of the sovereignty of the place.
Yes, but I think they're looking for. The Americans are looking for people within Cuba who want to have a future there, but understand there's got to be change at the top.
Well, how is a regime like the Trump administration going to deal with the potential arrival of potentially millions of Cubans on Florida shores, Jack?
Don't know. And they certainly aren't saying, and nor would I expect them to be saying. I wouldn't expect any government to be saying, this is what we're going to do if that happens.
Looks increasingly like it will. The Tico Times, which is a Caribbean paper, reports that Costa Rica became the last country to urge its citizens to leave Cuba immediately. The United Kingdom's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office followed suit. The Irish have said, please leave now. Australia's Smart Traveller raised its level to reconsider travel needs to Cuba on February 12th. Even Russia, a major source, this baffled me, Jack. Even Russia, a major source of Cuba's tourists, has shifted course. Russian authorities announced evacuation plans for around 4,000 citizens, with airlines like Rossiya operating one-way return flights from Havana and Varadero. The Russian Ministry of Economic Development urged suspending new bookings amid the fuel emergency. The Guardian reports Cuba's government has already shut universities, secondary schools, and non-essential state offices and pulled back on public transport. Cuba is in crisis, Jack, and it doesn't look like the regime will still be there in some shape or another in, let's say, a year. But there's going to be some real problems that arise in American Caribbean politics around all of this.
Yeah, I don't think the regime will sell out in its current form.
I think a year's been kind, but what I'm suggesting, Jack, is that there will be significant political consequences as a result of revolution or a regime change in Cuba that will be felt harshest by the Americans. So we'll see how that all goes. That's one that's bubbling away quite significantly. Jack, one-hit wonders. Have you ever had a hit?
I've just got to say,
I can't say my books have ever been hits. They've sold okay, but they haven't been hits.
Just got to say, regime change in Cuba has been United States foreign policy for 50 years.
We get the history, Jack. Bay of Pigs. It goes back away.
Yeah.
The world nearly blew itself up over one particular blow. They reckon they were really just, there was a big stare down there, and Khrushchev and the Kennedys kind of went, "Oh, is this where we really want to go?" And they've kind of backed off. Anyway, it's been this one could be really significant, particularly if you do have a large number of Cubans fleeing Cuba quite quickly in the event of violence breaking out in the country. But look, we've got to go back to one-hit wonders, Jack. This is your bit.
I saw this. This bloke was saying his 16-year-old asking this question. First of all, he was delighted that she'd read it. Is Harper Lee the greatest one-hit wonder of all time? She wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, and that's it.
Of course, we were talking about it before, To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, Jack, I've got to say, I wouldn't say she was a one-hit wonder. In fact, she got a pretty good strike rate. She only wrote 2 novels.
Yeah.
And the second novel, Go Set a Watchman, was published, I think, in 2016, a year before her death. And it was a significant seller. Perhaps hasn't sold quite as many copies as To Kill a Mockingbird. But she did that. She also released a collection of short stories, or a collection of short stories were released posthumously. I don't know how that sold, but I imagine they would have done the rounds of the libraries pretty well. So I guess my issue is this: look, if you've had one hit, you're doing pretty well.
My word, you're doing well.
Yeah, exactly right.
This was put up on social media, and these were the top responses straight away.
Yeah.
J.D. Salinger, Mary Shelley, who wrote the Frankenstein.
Yeah, but there's a significant body of work there too. But go on.
Yeah. Well, I think with Mary Shelley there is Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind.
Yes. Yeah, well, that is a one-hit wonder. That is.
Yeah. John Kennedy Toole, Confederacy of Dunces.
Yes.
And one that really amused me was Frances Scott Key.
Give me a title.
She wrote the national anthem of the United States in 12 minutes.
Well, as you say, Mary Shelley had a significant body of work. In fact, I bought, for a dear friend, a first edition of Mary Shelley. And not Frankenstein, unfortunately, because they go for a fortune, but one of her children's stories, actually. And bought a first edition of that, which is a good deal cheaper. J.D. Salinger. I mean,
he had a couple of other good books as well.
Oh, yeah.
The short stories. Yes, he did.
Franny and Zooey. And that book was very, very popular with the reading. Well, this is a quote from Wiki. Book was very popular with the reading public, spending 26 weeks at the top of the New York Times fiction bestsellers list. But J.D. Salinger's major work, obviously, it's probably made him quite crazy, and he basically fled into obscurity. He sought obscurity. J.D. Salinger after the release of A Catcher in the Rye. And that has probably been bothering school students, that particular book, for the last 50 years, Jack.
Interestingly, of the ones who've survived, I mean, I'm told no one reads Catcher in the Rye at all. Right?
Even when I read it in the enforced reading in the 70s, that would have been mid to late 70s, 75, 76, I suppose. It didn't make a lot of sense for an adolescent boy even then.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not quite 10 years older, and everyone read it. In my era, kind of thing. So, and To Kill a Mockingbird's not read much at all either anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a shame. I'm not sure that there are too many lessons to take out of A Catcher in the Rye. But it was one of those things that really caught people, and you know, every teenage boy kind of read it. It fitted into a time. It's a discussion about existentialism. Driven by the French, by Sartre, driven by Camus, and it was sort of its time. If you really wanted to, if people want to read some of the wonderful pieces of American literature, Grapes of Wrath, start and work your way along there, or Philip Roth. I think Philip Roth is one of my favourite authors, and Joseph Heller when we're talking about 20th century hits. Go and get stuck into that. All right, Jack, sport, T20 World Cup. I've watched a hell of a lot of this, by the way. And, of course, Australia's out in the group section. And, as usual, many people are not happy about that.
Yes. I think some of my English friends have been rather enjoying this, you know.
I know Piers Morgan had a bit of a thoughts and prayers type.
I'm not a pal of Pierce, but I have a lot of English friends. Comments like, "Gee, being poorly prepared and having poor selection seems to work really well, especially if you smother it with a fair bit of hubris." You know, these are the very criticisms I was making of their team over the summer.
Of course. It goes around, comes around. But look, Australia's preparation, you can't really fault it. They had a T20. Build up in Pakistan. It just went really badly. They were well beaten, so they had some games there. So similar sort of conditions. They played all their games at Sri Lanka, and some of those surfaces were a little bit jibs. I'm not making excuses, by the way. They, as I said to some of my English friends who are having a bit of fun at I said Zimbabwe have always had us. They've always been a problem. I think they knocked Australia off in a World Cup, a 50 over World Cup in the 80s, and there was hell to pay after that. So we got beaten by Zimbabwe. We also got beaten by Sri Lanka. Perhaps not such a crime, but some good efforts for some people. But the batting is it's not really there. And so the big question is, our best batsman was not on the touring party initially, at least, and then when he was, they didn't play him.
He was easily the best batsman in the Big Bash League. Mark Waugh really opened the shoulders and had a lot to say. Yeah. But the one point that he makes, that I think it's a really good one, is that T20 cricket is a hard format to find form in, because you've got to go out there blasting. You can't you can't just play a few shots and hope that you find the ball hitting the middle of the bat and then go. You've got to go before you get to that point.
Yeah. But at the same time, we had Mitch Marsh and Travis Head against Sri Lanka come out and belt the absolute cover off the ball, and then Australia just kept losing wickets after that. You know, they put 100 on, in about 7 or 8 overs. That is a perfect launching pad, and then they just fell away. I've always got the sense there was a bit of holidays about it. I don't mean that as a sort of sign of disrespect to the players, but I think we're always going to struggle there, but you're right about the form. One thing that Matt Renshaw said that I really got.
See, why didn't he play? He was in form. He played really well the match
why
before.
Why did Matthew Kuhneman get dropped for Chris Connolly, who simply can't buy a run at the moment?
No, which is not to say he's not a good cricketer.
No,
he's a
really good cricketer.
He's just not in form.
You've got to pick blokes in form.
Well, yeah,
I keep saying this. Anyway, Renshaw said, of the Minnow nations, you see, don't forget that they actually are playing a lot of T20 together. So, I mean, there's a lot of T20 around them, various leagues and the IPL, the BBL and all this sort of stuff. But they're playing a lot of cricket together to get into this sort of qualification process that allowed them to compete in the World Cup. So they're not just being dragged together. I did see the Scottish side. They look like they just dragged a few blokes out of the pub.
Well, but they did. I mean, they actually did. Yeah, because they only got to go because the Bangladeshis boycotted it. So they looked like a slightly overweight, out of season club side because that's what they are.
With a pint to the mouth, just being told you're on the burner.
Hang on,
you've got to go to Sri Lanka and compete.
And you're thinking, God, where's my kit, right? I've got to be on the plane in the morning.
So that's understandable. But the rest of them have been very, very high quality. We did talk about Nepal last week. I watched them play again. They didn't manage a win. It's their first time in the T20 World Cup. But they prepared really, really well. Their fielding was impressive.
Yes.
They've got a lot of work to do.
Did you say
bowling
Stuart,
and batting wise, but batting in particular.
Stuart Law was managing.
Stuart Law is the coach, and you go. I know what you said, Stuart. You said you don't have to. You can't compete with some of these sides with the batting and the bowling, but the fielding you can do it. So quite a few drills I would have thought being done.
When they get rid of Brendan McCullum, perhaps the English could give Stuart Law the job because that cost them a hell of a lot over the summer, not being able to field well.
Indeed. And Stuart Law, well, I'm sure, I think if you're the coach of Nepal, don't know, it'll be a full-time job. But it certainly wouldn't be the 365 days. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, no, but it'd probably be quite a nice gig to get. Probably doesn't pay a huge amount of money, but you'd probably quite enjoy it. Nepalese people, lovely people.
State of Origin, Jack, but in the AFL. I was screaming at the telly about 20 minutes in when Jacob Wiedering, Carlton's key defender, went down with what looked to be serious concussion and a neck injury. I'm going, I want this to stop now. And fortunately for Jacob, he suffered no particular neck injury. No, he has fractured a rib, Jack. So he'll be out. He'll be a little bit sore. One suspects maybe not available for the first game. But Jesus, you can't have that. And I think that's why everyone said, "Oh no, we'll go on through." Look, there were a number of sides. I think the Giants have lost a couple to injury. And there'll be clubs just going, why are we doing this 3 games before the season starts?
I thought it was a success. Big crowd.
I know a lot of people said it was Perth. You don't have to, you don't need to convince, you don't need a big advertising campaign to get them up and watching the footy first game of the year. And it was a very good standard. I know all that.
Are you saying there's not much else to do in Perth? Are you sledging our West Australia?
Not necessarily sledging the people of Perth. I'm saying it'd be rather easy to get them out in number at Optus Oval for a State of Origin Vic v WA game.
Any Western Australian listeners, he is sledging Perth. Trust me on this.
I am saying that you basically that will not have any difficulty selling tickets. I think they had into the 50s there, wasn't it? So it was a near enough to full crowd.
58, I think, near enough to a full crowd.
What
I found is interesting to watch.
Where are you going to play this? You can't play it 3 games. You just can't. And the idea of you playing a postseason is ridiculous. So I just don't think there's a time in the season for this. That's my issue.
Oh no, I think it'll keep going after that. I think it was a success.
The AFL certainly wants it to be.
Yeah. What interested me, it's one of the least silly things the AFL's done, and they've done plenty of silly ones. What interested me was, it was a terrific standard of footy, except there wasn't much defence. I've got to say, I mean, it wasn't much all round the ground defence. Players obviously felt pretty free just to go for it. But what interested me were the ones who, even at that higher standard, still stood out. First of all, there was a few who were clearly not up to the standard. Poor Rory Lobb had a shocker, but
I did see that too. I was still screaming at the television at the time.
Yeah, but looking at the ones, even though you're playing at a higher skill level, who still stood out, and for me they were Dacos and Dangerfield, Cozzy Pickett, Luke Jackson as a midfielder, terrific. But the bloke who I thought really stood out for me was Barras. I knew he was a good player. I just didn't think he was that good. No?
Yeah, look, Dacos didn't win the medal, and I don't know how. He had about 38, and he was involved in a lot of scoring, and I don't quite know. Who did win the medal in the end?
Ash. Which I didn't have him in my best five. But the other blokes are Lawson Humphreys, Mitch Georgiadis.
Yeah, he's a hell of a good forward, isn't he?
Yeah,
I mean, he was the one who threw himself at the pack as Jacob Weeding was backing into it.
Yeah,
and caused the damage, but went hard at the footy. I'm not sure. I just don't think there's a time in the. I know they'll go again, but I know the clubs will be sitting there hating every minute of it. The players want to play. I'm sure they do too.
They do, yes. And the coaches who are involved want to coach. So I'm sure Dean Cox will put his hand up again, and Chris Scott, I'm sure, would as well.
It'd be interesting to see what the ratings were outside of Victoria. I should have had a look, but whether it was a big money spin. I mean, money spin, I guess they would have made enough money just on the gate receipts alone. But anyway, the Winter Olympics, the Canadians having a bit of a cheat, Jack. They got caught red-fingered, really.
Yeah, I don't know how curling works still, to be quite honest.
It's normally a very affable game, Jack. There's no barnings, but here's this Canadian cheat and a disgrace is telling his opponents to fuck off left, right and centre.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it myself. What I was pleased about was that Twitter never lets me down. Within about 4 hours, there were lots and lots of people who were full bottle on how curling works. I picked it up very quickly. You're not allowed to leave the finger or take your finger off and then put it back on. Yeah,
that's it. That's like, what would that be like, Jack? Chucking. It'd be like chucking, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the great things about social media. It takes 10 minutes to find about 10,000 world exports on.
To be honest, I saw the early reports about cheating, and I did not know what they were talking about. They were showing the Canadian, letting him in the book, but then it was, they had the close-ups, and there he was with the hand on the stone, Jack, a disgrace.
Yeah.
Did they lose them? It didn't actually impact on the results. They didn't do anything about it, did they? Or did they DQ him?
No. He wasn't disqualified. No, I don't think so.
Well, what else has caught your fancy there, Jack, in the Winter Olympics? The
Winter Olympics. Oh, I tell you, who did catch my fancy was I don't know whether you saw him, the Norwegian cross country skier.
Yeah, Klæbo.
Yeah, Klæbo. He runs uphill at 6-minute mile pace in snow with skis on his feet.
I could probably almost do that in a car.
It's kind of Bradman-like. He is just a whole level above everybody else. That so far in front. You watch him in a race. And you're just waiting for him to press the go button.
Off he goes.
And he goes. Yeah, it's all over,
He's the standout in all of that. Jack, in Adelaide, we had the Live contest, the Saudi-funded golf tournament, Jack, and it seems to work here. Does it work here?
It does work in Adelaide. It's not working all that.
It seems to in Adelaide.
I mean, they draw a crowd in Hong Kong. But
can we do the old staff for entertainment angle again? This time with Adelaide. There's lots to do with Adelaide. Don't get me wrong, but wow.
They have a thing called the watering hole around one of the holes, which seems to be an excuse to get on the singing syrup. So That's very popular.
They do that. Yeah, something similar occurred. Well, that sounds less organised than the Adelaide Test, Jack, where there are just shops and stalls and food and drinks and all that sort of stuff. It's actually rather wonderful. The
Adelaide Test's always been good. Right back in the old ground, it was still terrific before it was redone. But at the same time, not sure how Liv's going. There's been a couple of golfers who've handed back most of the money and gone back to the PGA. So
is that what they have to do? They've got to give the money back before they can rejoin the PGA?
You can't just walk out and keep the lot, I don't believe.
What are we just talking prize money or earnings?
No, mate, these bugs got huge sign-up.
That's what deals. I mean.
So I think part of the sign-up money's got to go back before you can return to the PGA. So
pretty big disincentive not to go back to the PGA, particularly if someone's slung you 10 mil.
Or bigger than 10 for a lot of these players. Yeah.
Premier League, Jack, Arsenal are 5 points in a game ahead of Man City, who are hunting them. There's a real sense of deja vu about this because Man City have hunted down Arsenal, I think, the last two seasons. Certainly 2024 was a case of Arsenal being a mile in front and then being run down. But Noel Gallagher, who is a huge fan of Man City, says no. He told TalkSport.com, I look at Arsenal, I just don't see them slipping up. They've got too much on the bench. Everyone's been banging on this morning about how great that game was yesterday. That's the game. That's a Man City game. The last 10 minutes were amazing. The previous 80 minutes were literally a demonstration of why Arsenal are going to win the league this year. Oh, sorry, other game. That was it. The last 10 minutes were chaos and it was brilliant, but that was not a great game yesterday. I don't care what anyone says. I thought we were great in the last. Oh, that's a Man City-Liverpool game that he's referring to there. But he's actually tipped. He's tipped that Arsenal will win the comp. He talked about getting in a cab with a Tottenham supporting cabbie, and the Tottenham supporters they dread the very idea of an Arsenal trophy.
They do.
At the other end of the Premier League table, Jack, West Ham is sitting in really dark and dank, huge relegation problem area. And this, Jack, I don't know. Have you read much about the deal? Well, we have mentioned it on the show before. Boris Johnson signed up West Ham for, I shouldn't laugh, but it's going to cost. It's already costing the people of the ratepayers of London millions of pounds a year, but it'll cost them even more if West Ham, one of the great English clubs, are relegated. And it looks like that's the case, Jack. Got a way to go. Arsenal being hunted by Man City and West Ham. Well, they're third bottom, and three of them go out. They're a win behind the side above them, so they are in desperate straits.
I remember when that deal was signed. West Ham had most of the bargaining power because nobody else wanted to do it.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you write some terrible terrible deal that will lead to a massive liability being felt by the ratepayers. A deal at any expense sort of stuff. So this is really dumb, and there will be a focus on it if West Ham are relegated, because there'll be I think it's another £10 million will have to come from the City of London to fund all of that. All right. That takes us out for today's episode. We did
just a little Boris.
You got
Johnson.
a little bit of something for us, Jack, before we go?
It just came to my mind. I read a lovely Substack from, do you know Tina Brown, the journalist? She's written a really interesting thing about the Epstein thing. You'll find it on her Substack. But in it, she quotes Boris Johnson when he was Lord Mayor, and he's come back from a lunch with the then Prince Andrew, and his comment to his staff as he walked in was, "Look, I'll be the last person in the world to want to be a Republican. But if I've got to do a lunch with him again, I'm going to change my mind.
He's just not a good person, is he? That is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor now. I noticed too, the editors at the Oz, it dropped the D on Duke or Duchess once you are no longer in that position. The D comes is no longer capitalised. It's something I didn't know. That's just a form thing. It might not be the case. Certainly a form thing at the Australian. Look, we did receive a number of reader submissions today, including Ray. Ray, 8 a week. We can't run 8. You can just try and get it down to 1 or 2, mate, please. But we would like to throw your stuff in, Ray, and everybody else. So you drop us a line. You know how to get hold of us. You can get hold of me on Twitter. You can pretty much get hold of me on Facebook. You can get hold of Jack on his Substack. Or you can just knock on his apartment door and demand to come in.
If Ray wrote 8, is that why I couldn't find any capital letters?
Well, they've all been spent. No, he had plenty for us, and we might throw them in, but a lot of them weren't particularly relevant for the show today. So we might whack a few of those in next week, Ray. But yeah, just a couple of weeks, mate, please. And also unhappy that his letters to the editor are not being published in the Australian. I said, like, look, mate, I'm just not an influential person. I can't help you with that. All right, takes us out. Thanks for your time, and we'll be back next week with all the news and media stuff from Australia and around the world. Cheers, folks. See ya.